Hey everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I teach you all about painting miniatures, miniature painting, and yes, this is going to be part 51, painting red, which is one of the harder colors people find when painting miniatures. So today we're going to cover it as a color on a Space Marine. That's cool. So red, as I said, could be a challenging color. It's one of the four arguably hardest colors to paint miniatures as a primary color, and it could be challenging. Since red is a dark color, people often argue about what is the best color primer to use under it. Should I go white? Should I go gray? Should I go black? Second, it does show brush strokes really easily, so the answer to that part is going to be to thin down your paints as always. And three, there's a lot of debate on the highlight color. Do you highlight in, because the light red is essentially pink, or do you essentially go orange or reddish orange? So there's a lot of confusion about what colors to highlight, and then do you end there or do you use a glaze in the end? So today we'll be covering all those in great detail. So first of all, what is the best color primer? Well, that's, as I said, up for debate because red is such a dark color, it can go over anything. My personal opinion, if you're painting a primary color of red, if you want a really nice vibrant red, the best color is white. Since painting over dark will still be nice, but it'll end up being a little bit more dull or darker of a color. So today we will be painting over a white primed Space Marine miniature. We're going to paint red, and it's going to be a fun process as we're going to cover. So today we're going to use 5 different colors of red. We're going to start off with Midtone red as a base color, a shade of Carroburg Crimson, 2 highlights. First is a mid-tone highlight with Evil Sun Scarlet, an edge highlight with Wild Rider Red, and finally a blood letter glaze to tie all these colors together and just create a really nice blend of colors with them. And that's what we're used to create our red today. So we'll start off with Midtone red, and of course we're going to give it a good shake as always and add some to our palette, since I always prefer to use a palette. And then of course we're going to thin it down with a little bit of airbrush thinner, and that way we get a nice thin consistency, especially when we're going over white. If you have to do 2 coats, that's okay, but you want to do a nice thin consistency, that the way there's no brush strokes being shown and you get a nice even coat over the white. And then all we're gonna do is take our paint and go over this white paint. So it's gonna go over really easily since we're going over a white, a white primed miniature, and that's how you get the truest, brightest white color is painting over a white primer. You can, as I said, you can go over gray, you can go over black, you just won't end up with the same brightness and the vividness of the red that gets when you paint over a white primed miniature. And so we're just going to take our paint and apply it nice and evenly over the miniature. And as I said, if you're unhappy with the coat after a single coat, feel free to do a second. And that way you get a nice even coat coverage and you don't get to show any brush strokes. Now, once the paint starts to dry, once you put it onto the miniature, leave it until it dries entirely, because that's how you get cracking in the paint colors and that's how you show brush strokes. So once I've painted a surface, I am not going to go back and repaint it. I'm just going to let it dry entirely, and if I'm unhappy with the coverage after a single coat, I will do a second one. And now I'm just applying the same coat to the back. And as you can see, it's a thin paint, so it'll dry much darker and it will dry, much more solid than it looks right now since I'm going over white. The downside when painting over white is that you can obviously tell where you've not painted, and it does look really counterintuitive with the unpainted areas, being bright white as opposed to a dark primed miniature where it just appears as shadows. So you got to be careful, make sure you paint the entire miniature. And after a coat, as you can see now, we get that nice bright red coverage. And now it's time to do a shade to get into the recesses and the edges and give some great detail to it with some Carroburg Crimson shade. Now I'm going to apply this straight out of the bottle. If you want a little bit more subtle shading, feel free to dilute, I'd say a 1-1 mix of water and Carroburg Crimson, but I'm going to try, I like my shading with reds, I like it to be very dark, almost a black, but not quite there. I like to be very strong contrast between the recesses and the peaks of each area. So I'm going to just take it straight from the bottle and apply it to the entire surface. And as before, if you're unhappy with the shading after a single step, feel free to do a second one, just to make sure the first one's completely dry before proceeding to the second coat. And here I go, just adding the shade into all the back parts so it's going to get in the recesses and bring out the really nice details of this miniature, and that's what we want for the shade. And when it's dry, as you can see now, there's tons of detail. Now we're into our first mid-tone highlight with Evil Sun's Scarlet. I'm going to thin it down as well, so that way, you don't show any brush strokes. And what I'm going to do now is leave the recesses in the edges, the nice shade that we just worked so hard on, and I'm going to apply this coat to basically everywhere else and build up the raised areas to a brighter color. So as you see, I'm intentionally leaving some gap between where I'm painting and the recesses in the edges, but then the rest of it's going to be the Evil Sun's Scarlet. And this is just, and as I said, because we did thin down the paint, it's going to blend really well with the base coat and the shades, so you'll still get some really nice contrast and some great shading over the miniature. As you can see now, I'm just with the feet, I'm just painting the very center circles of it, and I'm leaving the edges the really nice shade. And for the shoulder pads, I'm doing the same thing, just leaving all the outer circle of it, the recesses, and leaving it shaded, and then working my way towards the center, making it lighter. And as I said, if you, once again, because you're using thin paints, if you're ever unhappy with a coat, let it completely dry and then apply a second coat over it just to get that solid color that you're looking for. But just make sure that it's completely dry, because red is really bad for showing cracks, I find, in paints. And now that's completely done. As you can see now, the miniature looks great. Now there's definitely edge details and we're building up another color, but you gotta do one more highlight just to make those edges really stand out and to draw the attention of the viewer to certain spots. So we're gonna do an edge highlight with Wild Rider Red. Now this is my favorite color to do edge highlights with reds, but you'll notice Wild Rider Red is kind of a reddy orange. It's actually slightly out of the range of the spectrum of reds, I'd say. It's more of an orange than a red. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick all the edges we really want, like the edges of the helmets, the edges of the mouth, the eyes, and for the shoulder pads, the hands, we're just do edge highlights over the entire miniature of where we want to really stand out and pop, and then we're gonna tie them all together after with a bloodletter glaze. So let's just pick all the details we want. As you can see, I'm just running my brush along the edges of each surface, just getting a nice edge highlight going. Not putting too much pressure on those areas and keeping very little amount of paint on my brush, just doing a very quick load of the brush. That way you don't get too much. Picking up the edges of the hands, the fingers, the elbows, tops of the knees. I really always like to do the top edge of the knee. Ends up making them really pop and stand out. And the top of the feet as well. Just picking up which surfaces I really want the eyes to be drawn to. Tops of the backpack, pretty much wherever he wants to stand out. But as you can see, there's quite the contrast between the Wild Rider Red and the Evil Sun Scarlet. It's much closer to an orange, as I said, to a red. It is in between, but I do find it very close to an orange. And I'm just picking up the details of the back, doing quick edge highlights. And that's it. So when it's completely done, as you can see now, there's nice edge detailing. But as I said, to tie it all together, we're gonna use a bloodletter glaze, because what it'll do is it'll tone down that reddy orange of the Wild Rider Red and really blend these colors so there's a great subtle transition from the recesses all the way to the Wild Rider Red. So I'm just gonna take it and apply a thin coat to the entire surface of the miniature. Remember, these glazes dry significantly darker than when you put them on. So let them dry entirely and apply in thin coats, because you'll be surprised. And if you apply too much, it'll really darken it. So it's better just to apply thin coats at a time. And once again, if you're unhappy, apply a second coat. As I said, they do dry significantly darker, and they dry actually quite quickly. It seems that they take much less time to dry than a shade. And I'll just apply it sparingly over the entire miniature. And apply it to the back, of course. And instead, it'll just tone down the reddy orange, bring it all back to the red spectrum, and we're in good shape. And all the reds will be tied together. And that's it. When it's dry, you have a completely finished red miniature. And that's it. It's not too complicated to paint reds, but as you can see, there's no brush strokes. It is very subtly highlighted. There's some great details in the recesses, and we got built up some areas too. As you notice, I didn't paint all the areas in the miniature with the reds because I would normally paint some areas with other colors. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Miniature Painting 101. Stay tuned for part 52, which is just around the corner. But if you can't wait for next week, click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel, where not only we get to see the next 6 months worth of Miniature Painting 101 episodes, you get to see start to finish paint tutorials, battle reports, airbrushing videos, and just some awesome wargaming content. So go ahead and check out the Warp. I think you'll love it. So thank you very much for watching as always. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting everyone.